Have you ever felt like your online presence has just gotten a little too big, too much to manage? Like, maybe you're spending more time fiddling with the tech stuff than actually, doing what you want to do online.
Yeah, that feeling, the one where your tools are kind of running you instead of the other way around. It's surprisingly common. A lot of people are wrestling with that these days.
And that's exactly what we're going to dig into today. We're diving into a blog post by Neville Hobson. It's called From WordPress to Ghost, Reflections on a Fresh Start. And he just published it just the other day, March 31st, 2025. But this isn't just some quick experiment, right? Neville has been using WordPress for something like 20 years.
Wow, 2 decades. That is a lot of digital history. Tons of content built up on that platform, I bet. You don't just walk away from that easily.
Yeah, you're right. There's got to be a really good reason for a change that big. So what we want to do today is figure out why Neville decided to make the switch. What were the challenges? What did he learn along the way? And what does it all mean for the rest of us? Whether you're writing online, creating stuff, or just trying to manage your online presence, we're going to pull out the key takeaways from Neville's story so you can think about your own digital toolkit.
It's all about getting down to the essentials, right? What do you really need from your online platforms? That's the question.
Okay, so let's get right to it. What was it that made Neville finally decide to ditch WordPress after all that time?
Well, he lays out a few really clear reasons in his post. One of the big things is just how much online writing and publishing has changed. The way people read online now, they expect things to be clean, fast, no distractions. Nobody's got the patience for a slow website or a design that's just too much to handle.
Oh yeah, totally. We've all been there. You click a link and the page takes forever to load, or it's just a wall of text and pop-ups. You just close the tab and move on, right?
Exactly. And Neville talks about that, feeling bogged down by all the administrative stuff that comes with running a WordPress site. Updates, plugins, security worries, and of course, all those sales pitches for more plugins and themes. It sounds like it was taking up a huge chunk of his time he'd rather be spending on actually writing.
That's gotta be so frustrating, You start out wanting to create and share your work, and then you get stuck in this cycle of just keeping the website itself running. It's like the tail wagging the dog.
And he talks about that too, how something that used to be like fun and enjoyable started to feel exhausting. He really wanted to get back to just writing, connecting with his readers in a genuine way. He even asks, where's the authenticity in that? When he's talking about the pressure to write for search engine algorithms instead of for actual human beings.
Right, that makes total sense. You don't want to feel like you're just churning out content to please some algorithm. You want it to be real, something that connects with real people. And it sounds like Ghost, the platform he switched to, really helps with that, right?
Yeah, the built-in features for newsletters and subscriptions were a big draw for him. Instead of having to use all these different services and plugins and trying to get them to talk to each other, Ghost just has it all built in. Makes it way easier to build an audience and connect with them directly.
So less of a headache to manage. And he mentions this grand experiment with something called ActivityPub. What's that all about?
Okay, so this is where things get kind of interesting. ActivityPub is this technology that's used for decentralized social networks, like Mastodon. And Ghost is actually embracing that. Every Ghost Pro site can potentially become part of this wider Fediverse. Pretty cool.
Wait, so that means his blog could actually connect with platforms like Mastodon?
Yeah, potentially. And that means his content could reach new audiences without him having to manually post it everywhere. It's about making your content inherently more social, part of this more open, less controlled network.
I mean, that's a pretty forward-thinking approach to online presence, right? You're not just stuck in your own little corner of the internet.
Yeah, exactly. It's about breaking out of the traditional website silo and those often walled gardens of the big social media platforms.
Now, let's be real. Neville's been online for a long time. We're talking over 4,000 posts and pages on his main WordPress site, plus another huge archive. That's a massive amount of stuff.
Oh, yeah. He even calls it content bloat at one point.
Oh.
And you can see why. I mean, after years of that, WordPress starts to feel less like a nimble tool and more like, a giant overstuffed suitcase you're dragging around. He was definitely ready for something cleaner and more streamlined.
So this wasn't just a tech decision, right? It sounds like it was also a philosophical thing, stripping away all that digital clutter and getting back to basics.
Totally. It's about matching the tools you use to your values, to a kind of online presence you want to build.
Okay, so Ghost has this appeal of simplicity and focus. But what were the actual pros and cons Neville had to weigh up before making such a big move?
Well, on the plus side, The simplicity of the writing and publishing process was a big win. The Ghost interface is really designed to eliminate distractions, so you can just focus on writing.
Hmm.
Plus, those built-in newsletter and subscription features, they make it so much easier to connect directly with readers. And you've got both free and paid options there, so there's flexibility.
He also mentions improved performance and speed, which is huge. I mean, we all know how frustrating it is to visit a slow website.
Oh, for sure. And Ghost is generally known for being pretty lightweight and fast, especially compared to a WordPress site that's been loaded up with plugins over the years. Plus, that minimalist, reader-focused design aesthetic really fit with what Neville was going for. And here's a surprise. He actually says he might even save money in the long run compared to his old setup with SiteGround and all those premium WordPress plugins.
Interesting. You wouldn't always assume switching platforms would save you money. But let's talk about the downsides. Moving all that content can't have been easy.
Yeah, that was a big one. Migrating all that content was a major headache. Over 4,000 posts and pages, it wasn't a simple export-import job. One of the main issues was that Ghost doesn't natively handle images that are hosted on WordPress's CDN. That's the content delivery network, by the way, which WordPress uses to make images load faster. So if you've got a blog with tons of pictures and they're hosted on the WordPress CDN, migrating to Ghost gets a lot more complicated.
Oof. I can only imagine trying to move thousands of images manually. That sounds like a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, it'll be a huge time sink. Plus, there's the whole issue of short codes and formatting. A lot of that stuff that works in WordPress doesn't translate directly to Ghost, so you'd have to go through and fix everything by hand. And even though he moved his old WordPress archives to a cheaper hosting provider, Hostinger, there are still costs involved in keeping that archive up and running. So he's essentially running two sites now, which adds another layer of complexity.
Right, so he's got the new streamlined site and the old archive. Gotcha.
Exactly. And even with 301 redirects, there's always a risk of messing up your SEO when you move to a new domain name. Plus, Neville points out that Ghost, especially the hosted version, doesn't offer the same level of customization as WordPress. With WordPress, you've got this huge ecosystem of themes and plugins, and you can really tweak things to your heart's content. Ghost is more about simplicity, so you trade some of that flexibility.
So it's really a question of priorities, right? Do you want the freedom to customize everything, or do you value that out-of-the-box simplicity?
Yeah, that's a key consideration. And he also mentions some limitations with media management in Ghost. It doesn't have that familiar WordPress-style media library, which might be a drawback for some people.
Sounds like he had to do a lot of juggling, balancing that desire for a simpler platform with the reality of what it takes to move a website with so much history behind it. And ultimately, that led to a pretty big decision, right? He decided not to migrate everything to Ghost.
Yeah, initially the plan was to move everything over to his existing domain, nevillehobson.com. That would make sense, right? Keep the same brand, keep the same SEO authority. Seems like the obvious move.
Yeah, you'd think so.
But then he had a really in-depth chat with John Hickman, the support lead at Ghost. And they really dug into the technical challenges. And it became clear that migrating everything with all those images and formatting issues would be a nightmare. The sheer volume of images hosted on the WordPress CDN was a deal breaker.
So the technical details kind of forced a change in strategy.
They did. It became clear that trying to force a full migration would just lead to a ton of headaches down the road. Plus, there was a realization that migrating everything meant bringing along all that historical baggage, all those old plugins and bits of code from years of WordPress updates. It's like moving into a brand new house and then filling it with all the junk from your old attic.
It kind of defeats the purpose of a fresh start, right?
Exactly. So he decided to go for a clean break. New domain name, nevillehobson.io. New brand name too, Studio 6 by Neville Hobson. The old WordPress site is still online as an archive at nevillehobson.com, but the new site on Ghost is all about moving forward. And I think it's a smart compromise. He keeps the value of his old content without letting it weigh down the new site.
Yeah, it's like acknowledging the past but not being chained to it. So he launches nevillehobson.io, Studio 6 by Neville Hobson. What was that experience like?
Well, he talks about the launch being really positive. He picked the name Studio 6 to represent this new chapter. It's a reference to like all different workspaces he's had over the years, with this new one being his sixth. And the site officially went live on Sunday, March 9th, 2025, just a little bit behind his original schedule. I think it's interesting that he went with a separate brand name instead of just using his own name. Really emphasizes that fresh start.
Yeah, it shows a real intentionality, like he's building something new and different.
And he actually quotes from his launch post talking about how he wanted to simplify things, focus on what's important, and have real conversations with his readers instead of just chasing algorithms. He said the initial setup with Ghost Pro was super straightforward, which is exactly what he was looking for. Less complexity, more focus on the content. He's using a free theme called Source, which seems to give him enough customization without being overwhelming.
It sounds like he really appreciates that clean, distraction-free writing environment.
Oh yeah, and he loved how tightly integrated the blog posts are with the newsletter feature. Every time he publishes a new post, it automatically gets sent out to his subscribers, and you can track everything, opens, clicks, all that, right within Ghost. No need for separate email marketing tools or anything.
That's going to save a ton of time.
It does. And he says the site performance is noticeably better, faster loading times, which is always a plus. And he raves about the Ghost support team, says they've been super helpful throughout the whole process. He even went ahead and installed Ghost Pro on his own computer so he could test things out without messing up the live site. Sounds like he's really happy with the switch overall.
But there were bound to be a few hiccups along the way, right? He does mention some gotchas and lessons learned. What were some of the big ones?
Well, one thing that tripped him up was the robots.txt file. That's the file that tells search engines like Google which parts of your site they can and can't index. And somehow, after the launch, his robots.txt file was blocking Google from indexing the whole new site. It might have been because the site was set to private during development, or maybe because he didn't have a sitemap set up yet. Anyway, he's still working with Ghost support to get it sorted out, but it's a good reminder that even small technical details can have a big impact.
Yeah, if Google can't see your site, you basically don't exist online.
Right. And there were also a few things that had a steeper learning curve than he expected. Like he mentions this thing about trying to align a small image with the text and how it was way more complicated than it should have. He had to resort to some clunky HTML workarounds, which he describes as headache-inducing. Just goes to show that every platform has its quirks, and you might have to learn some new tricks.
So even though Ghost is all about simplicity, there's still some things you need to figure out.
Oh, yeah. And he had some separate issues with setting up email for the new domain, messing with DNS settings and stuff like that. Eventually got it all sorted out before launch, but it just shows that even seemingly unrelated technical stuff can become a hurdle when you're switching platforms. But I think one of the biggest lessons he emphasizes is just the value of having a simpler workflow and being flexible, not being afraid to change course when things aren't working out as planned. That initial idea of migrating everything just wasn't feasible, and he was smart enough to realize that and adjust his strategy.
Adaptability seems like a pretty crucial skill for anyone making a big change like this.
Totally. He also talks about the importance of really thinking through the pros and cons before you jump ship. Don't just get swept up in the excitement of a new platform without considering the potential downsides.
So what's next for Neville and his Studio 6 site on Ghost? What are his plans?
Well, he's planning to really dig into those built-in newsletter and subscription features, build up a stronger connection with his readers. He also wants to explore ways to make his content more discoverable using Ghost's own tools. But ultimately, it sounds like he's really committed to this idea of creating content that's authentic, that connects with people on a deeper level, and it isn't just chasing algorithms.
It all comes back to that core motivation, right? That desire for genuine connection. Now, he does have a section in his post called Closing Thoughts on WordPress. It's not like he's bashing WordPress entirely, is it?
No, not at all. He actually has some really positive things to say about WordPress. He acknowledges that it's still a great platform for a lot of people, and he gives credit to its open source nature and the role it played in making online publishing accessible to everyone back in the early days of blogging.
Yeah, you can't deny the impact WordPress has had.
Absolutely. And he's clear that his decision to switch was a personal one, based on his own needs and priorities. He's not saying WordPress is bad, just that it wasn't the right fit for him anymore. And this leads him to some broader reflections on what's happening in the online world in general. He sees this move to Ghost as part of a larger trend, with more and more creators wanting to simplify their online presence, get away from the noise and algorithms, and build more direct relationships with their audiences.
Yeah, it does feel like there's a shift happening.
It does. And he encourages listeners to really think about their own digital tools and workflows, make sure they're still serving their purpose. But he's also careful to point out that Ghost isn't a magic bullet. It's not the perfect solution for everyone. If you've got a really customized WordPress site, multiple authors, or a ton of old content that needs to be migrated, switching to Ghost could be a real challenge. And there's definitely a learning curve involved, especially for people who are used to WordPress's ease of use and all those plugins. Plus, with the hosted version of Ghost Pro, you don't get direct server access, which could be a limitation for some users.
So you really need to know what you want and what you're comfortable with, tech-wise.
Exactly. He suggests that Ghost, especially the hosted version, might be a particularly good fit for people who are really focused on writing for humans, not for search engines. If authenticity and connection are your top priorities, Ghost could be worth a look.
That's a good takeaway. So if you're thinking about making a similar move or just want to learn more, Neville has a bunch of helpful links in his blog post.
Yeah, he links to the official Ghost migration guide, info about Ghost Pro hosting, and even his own post about embracing simplicity. He also mentioned some really insightful reviews from other people who've made the switch from WordPress to Ghost. Always good to hear different perspectives, right? And he gives a shout out to the Ghost Pro support team for being so helpful. And finally, he invites listeners to reach out and share their own experiences, whether they've made a similar move or are thinking about it. You can comment on his post, email him, connect on LinkedIn, or find him on Mastodon.
I love that. It shows that he's really interested in building a community around this idea, not just talking about it in isolation. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I think the key takeaway is that Neville's journey from WordPress to Ghost is a great example of how important it is to match your tech tools to your core purpose. It's about recognizing when your online presence has become more about managing the tech than about doing the work you actually care about. And it's about being willing to make a change, to simplify things, and to prioritize the things that matter most, like authenticity and connecting with your audience.
Absolutely. And sometimes that means letting go of the familiar, even if it's been a part of your online life for years.
And on that note, we'd like to leave you with one final thought. What administrative baggage might you be carrying around in your own work? And what could happen if you shifted your focus from algorithms to authenticity? It's something to think about.
It is. It's a question that can apply to so many aspects of our online lives.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it insightful.
We appreciate you being here. It's always fascinating to explore these kinds of decisions in detail.
We'll be back soon with another deep dive into something interesting. Until then, keep exploring, keep creating, and keep questioning the way you do things online.
Thanks for listening to this experiment in a new kind of podcast. I'm Neville Hobson, the one who wrote the blog post that Jack and Jill, our AI hosts, discussed today. I'll be back soon with more episodes, some created with AI, some in my own voice, along with reflections on how these tools are reshaping how we create, share and connect online. You can find more of my work at Studio 6 by Neville Hobson. That's at nevillehobson.io, where I explore the intersection of communication, technology and life's evolving priorities. Thanks again for listening.